Ladies and gents, and boys and girls of all ages, I welcome thee to the first episode of Comic Critic. Since this is the first episode, this is a show where I take a look at random pieces of media that I'm either on the fence with, or hate, or sometimes enjoy, ranging from mostly films and shows. And since this is the first episode, I decided the first thing I'm going to review is a show I am very on the fence with. And that is Clarence. For those who weren't even around when this show came out, Clarence is a slice of life show that aired on Cartoon Network from 2014 to 2018. Now, I did watch the show quite a bit when it first came out, but not really as it went on, because this came out just a year before I completely ditched TV in favor of YouTube. I'll be going over the episodes I've seen since it came out, what other critics might have said about the show, but nothing related to the creator. I know there was a controversy about him, but that's not what this is about, so moving on. I will be starting off with going a bit more deep into the show's premise, then what I hate about the show, and lastly what I liked about it. Now to dive more deep into what the show is about, it's about the main character going on random adventures, vibing with his friends, along with random people, and mostly causing unintentional trouble. But I'll come back to that. He has a main trio with his two friends Sumo and Jeff. While Sumo is a bit on par with Clarence, just wanting to have fun and having his own quirks, Jeff is basically the double D of the trio. A neat freak, germaphobe, obedient type of guy. He's like the moral ground for the two, and it does keep it balanced for the most part. There's other side characters throughout the show that could basically be considered friends or even acquaintances with Clarence, but we'd be here all day if I had to go through each one. Clarence, I will say, is also fortunate to have a decent mom and a decent stepdad. What happened to his real dad is up for debate, along with the question if Clarence has autism, but I'm not here to diagnose. And lastly, who I'm going to talk about is Clarence's so-called rival, Belson, a gamer in his class that really doesn't give a damn about anything and just wants to vibe with no interference. Sort of like the Squidward of the show, which I guess makes him the most interesting of all the characters, if you ask me at least. But his life and everything around that could make a whole other video. I'll be talking about his dynamic with Clarence a bit later, cause it can be pretty damning. Now, before we get to the bad, I'm gonna list off and very briefly go over some episodes I saw years ago that I rewatched and thought were okay, or weren't that bad. Consider it a lightning round, I guess. The first of these 4 episodes I'll be looking at very briefly is Dreamboat. To put it simply, the moral of the episode I think is decent and well executed. The moral and story could somewhat also fall under the same one that's in Meet the Robinsons. And also the scene with Sumo was hilarious.
Do you regret what you did? Nah. Would you do it again? Sure, why not?
The next one, Suspended, also has a bit of a strong moral as well. Maybe not the strongest, but it really does try, basically explaining why getting suspended isn't that great, and sometimes you do learn things outside of school. And it does have a couple jokes here and there that are also good. And moving on to this episode, it was just weird, but sort of in a funny way. Basically, a McDonald's-like fast food chain goes into business with Clarence's school, and the rest of the episode shows the whole school being turned into a cult. Yeah. Kinda odd. Also, there's this questionable shit. Moving on. And lastly, we have the episode titled Sue. What really makes this one episode stand out is Belson and Clarence. It doesn't show them at their best dynamic, but there are a couple moments in it throughout the episode that show that they sometimes don't mind each other. Though, of course, not all the time. But that is sadly where I am going to be delving into what I dislike about the show. Case in point, one of the big issues I have is that Clarence himself in some episodes can be really goddamn annoying. And to get the worst of the worst out of the way, bedside manners is just unsalvageable. Yeah, remember how I said Clarence causes unintentional trouble? Well, this episode I consider the worst case of that. To put it in short, Clarence goes to the hospital to visit Belson, who is in a full body cast. This can only end so well. And throughout most of the episode, Clarence attempts to make Belson feel better, when in reality, he's practically torturing him. We don't really see what he did to deserve this until the very end as well. Eventually, as Belson is rightfully pissed off, he bursts out what happened the night Clarence found him. Apparently, Belson was going to change the channel on Clarence's TV as a joke, and ended up falling off of his roof by accident. Now think about this. Does the punishment really fit the crime here? In this episode, there really isn't an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. What rubs more salt in the wound, however, is when Clarence, as a joke, gets Belson in more critical pain, and Belson is forced to listen to him rambling about bullshit. Clarence at first at least seems like he's trying to make him feel better by giving him a way oversized sandwich. I'm very simple when it comes to food, so why would I even critique that? But where the episode falls apart is when he gets to Belson's hospital room. Yeah, this episode really was just a chore to watch. Some critics have said that they hate the show because Clarence is flat out annoying, and this episode does portray it as such. And even though I know one reviewer said that kids are supposed to be annoying, that doesn't always make a good character. Even though Clarence is his worst in this episode, the rest of the show for the most part isn't enough to make him that intolerable per se. Unless you have scenes where he sings too much.
Come on everybody, let's sing one more song!
Shut the fuck up!
Even though Clarence being ungodly annoying in quite a few episodes is the biggest issue with the show, another issue as well that can be just as common is the gross out. And I'm talking Ren and Stimpy level. Hell, Ren and Stimpy would think some of the scenes are too nasty for them. A good example of this is in the episode Too Gross for Comfort. In short summary, Clarence enters a treehouse where his male friends hang out, but brings a girl with him. And boys being boys, try to tell nasty stories to get her to leave. Some stories they tell are more nasty than others. What makes everyone flip their shit is when the girl and Sumo begin kissing after trying to prove who has the grossest story. Now, I'm not sure if it's just as disturbing as the episode where Clarence gets a fish, though that episode in itself wasn't disturbing. The ending really made it that way. And lastly, one of the other things that gets on my nerves just a bit is this girl. As far as I know, she only appears in one episode, but that one appearance really shows how much of a despicable bastard she is.
I don't know why I do stuff like this. I just do.
What do you mean stuff? Stuff like what?
Mom, that boy took my candy!
God, she gives Sarah from Ed, Edd and Eddy a run for her money. Thankfully though, even though she didn't suffer consequences for her actions, Clarence didn't get wrongfully in trouble in that episode. Though looking back at bedside manners, I wish he was. Does this all mean I hate the show as a whole? Well, not quite. Thankfully, this is where we delve into what I think somewhat saves the show a bit. Also, is Clarence on acid in this scene?
If so, can I have some?
To start off with what I did like, I'll be talking about one of my favorite episodes first, because it does go into what I would have loved to see more throughout the show. Money Broom Wizard of all episodes I remember, I would consider it one of my favorite episodes of the series. Mostly because I wish the show was more like this episode. Though that might be why Craig and the Creek exists, even though I haven't seen that. But that said, I will say this episode would have to come to a close second because of the episode Average Jeff, which I also could make a whole other video about. The intro of the episode sort of brought me back to the time I discovered PewDiePie playing South Park The Stick of Truth back in early 2014. Yeah, I had a questionable childhood. I saw that game as a serious Harry Potter-like story as a kid and didn't get any of the adult jokes, but I digress. Clarence and his trio go to this Dave & Buster's style place, with laser tag, games, and food galore. But of course, Clarence forgets his 20 bucks, and is left to use a single dollar bill, leaving them one coin to make one game count. This leads to a couple side plots where Sumo plays some rhythm game, I think. Jeff tries figuring out how to beat a system that will give him countless tickets, and Clarence goes around basically helping other kids before going on an LSD trip. The moment he tries helping others out with games does at least put him in a much better light than in Bedside. Eventually he comes across Belson again as he and his friends are about to play laser tag.
Ah, cool, can I play with you guys?
Yeah, if you want to get blasted by the laser ghost.
Sure hope that doesn't inspire someone's old username. Wait, Of course, since Clarence doesn't have money left, Belson mocks him for it, and Clarence goes back to doing random shit. Eventually, Clarence throws a ball that ends up hitting the machine Jeff was trying to beat for a while. This unrealistically gives out thousands of tickets. Clarence and Jeff then get their prizes, being an epic laser pointer, and a disco ball that 70s rockers would despise.
Finger disco.
Disco blows dogs for quarters, man.
That's an intelligently biting remark wrought with wit and irony.
They then go into the laser tag rank to show off Jeff's laser pointer, and unintentionally win the laser tag game.
Don't touch the doctor!
They then leave, of course satisfied with their day. Now to recap, you have good chemistry with the trio, a small, relatable, but not so in-your-face rival, a couple side plots that intertwine just right, and lastly, it doesn't make the main character look like an annoying little bitch. If most of the show was about episodes like this, with the things I just listed, I probably would have liked it a lot more, at least in the early seasons. Like I said before, I didn't keep up with the show as it went on. I'm sure there are a couple other episodes, like this one, that are just as decent, but I'd have to rewatch more of the show. Now, I was also going to talk about the episode Belson's Backpack, but since I'd rather go more into that episode if I do a full video on Belson as a character, I will say this for now. Clarence and Belson's dynamic here was just as decent as it was in the episode Zoo, and even more so here because it was sort of the main focus of the episode. And that's all I have to say about Clarence, really. If there's enough demand, I might just keep making reviews like this, and maybe make a second or third part to this video where I go into the episode Average Jeff, or an analysis video on Belson. That said, thanks for watching.